Bruchim Aboim, again, welcome to our home. Thank you for attending. This week, on My Thoughts, we will continue with our in-depth examination of Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, with the beginning of the 7th Mishnah in the 2nd chapter, with the words of Hillel HaZaken, Hillel the elder. Now, Hillel teaches us a Mishnah that at first glance feels almost unsettling in its honesty. He says, increasing flesh increases worms, increasing possessions increases worry, increasing wives increases sorcery, increasing maidservants increases immorality, increasing servants increases theft, but increasing Torah increases life. Now, this sounds like a list of consequences, almost like a warning, but in truth, it's something much deeper. It's not a list of punishments, but a revelation of how life actually works. It's a window into the structure of existence, into the hidden reality that every form of increase carries with it something else that grows alongside of it. You know, a person naturally assumes that growth is always positive. After all, we are conditioned to believe that the more is always better. That expansion means success, that accumulation leads to fulfillment. You know, a person wants more comfort, more security, more resources, more influence, more control. And there is something natural about that instinct. But the Mishnah comes and gently disrupts that assumption. It teaches us that growth, when not anchored in clarity and purpose, does not simply expand life, and in reality it complicates it. Every increase brings with it a parallel increase, and the question is not whether something will grow, but what grows along with it. So the Mishnah begins with the most immediate and physical aspects of a person, the body. Increasing flesh increases worms. Now, this is not a rejection of the body, nor is it meant to disturb a person. After all, Judaism does not see the body as something negative. On the contrary, the body is holy, a vessel through which mitzvot are performed and through which holiness is brought into the world. So this Mishnah is addressing a much deeper issue, which is not the existence of the body, but identification with it. When a person invests their identity into physicality, when they begin to define themselves by their appearance, their pleasures, their comfort, or their physical experience, they are attaching themselves to something that is, by its very nature, temporary. The Mishnah reminds us with striking clarity that the body has an end point, not to frighten us, but to awaken us. Because if a person builds their identity upon something that does not last, then even while they are enjoying it, there is an underlying instability. There is a quiet awareness, whether conscious or not, that this cannot endure. And everything that cannot endure cannot provide true security. You know, the body is meant to be a vessel, not the essence. When it is used properly as a keli, as a vessel, for something higher, it becomes elevated and meaningful. But when it becomes the definition of the self, it limits the person to something finite and ultimately diminishing. From the physical, the Mishnah moves into the psychological and emotional world of a person, ha'adam. Increasing possessions increases worry. Here the teaching becomes even more relatable, because a person naturally believes that acquiring more will always bring peace of mind. If I have more, well, then I will feel more secure. If I build more, I will finally be able to rest comfortably. But the Mishnah reveals deeper truth about human nature. The more a person owns, the more they must manage. The more that they have, the more they must protect. The more that they accumulate, the more they have to lose. And so instead of reducing anxiety, well, possessions, more often than not, increase it. This worry is not always loud or obvious, it is often subtle, a quiet hum beneath the surface of life. A person becomes aware constantly of what could go wrong, or what could be lost, or what must be maintained. And so their inner world becomes tied to something external and unstable. Now, this is not because possessions are inherently negative, but because of what they awaken within a person. When a person anchors their sense of identity or security into what they own, they create dependency. And dependency, well, leads to fear, because anything outside of a person that they rely upon can be taken away or changed. So the Mishnah is not telling a person to reject possessions, but rather to understand their true nature. A person can own things, but they must not be owned by them. They can build, but they must not build their identity on what they have built. Because if their sense of self rises and falls with their possessions, then they will never truly be at rest. Their peace will always be conditional, and anything conditional can easily be shaken. So the Mishnah then continues, moving into the realm of relationships and human interaction. Increasing wives increases sorcery. Now this statement must be understood carefully and in its proper context. It's not speaking negatively about women, but about the complexity of relationships when they expand without depth, alignment, and clarity. In the language of Chazal, sorcery represents distortion, confusion, and a loss of clear perception. When relationships multiply without emet, truth, without integrity and depth, they increase emotional entanglement and inner conflict. Then a person becomes pulled in different directions, caught between competing loyalties, expectations, and emotional realities. So instead of clarity, well, there is confusion. Instead of simplicity, there is fragmentation. And this is what the Mishnah refers to as sorcery, not in a literal sense, but as a metaphor of life that has become clouded and distorted. So the message is not about quantity, but about integrity. One relationship built on truth brings clarity and stability, while multiple relationships without proper foundation can lead to inner disorientation. So the Mishnah then continues, further addressing structures of power and control. Increasing maidservants increases immorality, and increasing servants increases theft. Here the teaching shifts into the dynamics of authority and responsibility. When a person expands their control over others, when they create systems that serve themselves, well, they also introduce new vulnerabilities. Power, when not balanced with discipline and moral clarity, can lead to misuse. Access without boundaries can lead to failure. And complexity in systems can lead to breakdowns in trust and accountability. The more moving parts there are in a person's life, well, the more opportunity there is for something to go wrong. This is not because people are inherently corrupt, but because complexity creates distance, and distance weakens awareness and responsibility. Once again, the Mishnah is not condemning structure or growth. It is revealing a pattern. External expansion, if not matched with internal refinement, well, leads to instability and risk. So after guiding us through these layers of life, the Mishnah now turns with one final statement. It reframes everything. Increasing Torah increases life. This is not just another line in the list. It is the answer to everything that came before it. Because Torah operates in a fundamentally different way than all other forms of increase described in the Mishnah. Everything else adds to what a person has, where Torah adds to what a person is and could be. When a person increases possessions, they increase what they must manage. When they increase Torah, they increase their capacity to live with clarity and meaning. When they invest in the physical alone, they expand their external world, but often at the cost of their inner stability. But when they invest in Torah, they expand their inner world, and that inner expansion brings balance to everything else that they experience in life. Torah does not complicate a person's life. What it does is it clarifies it. It creates a center. And once a person has a center, everything else can exist around them without overwhelming them. They can have wealth without being consumed by it. They can engage in the physical world without being defined by it. They can navigate complexities in life without losing themselves in it. Because their identity is no longer rooted in what changes, but in what is eternal. The deeper teachings explain that Torah defines a person from within. It aligns them with their true self, with their soul, with their, we'll call mokar, their essence. It removes layers of confusion and reveals a deeper awareness of purpose and connection. And when a person is aligned internally, external increases no longer destabilize them. They no longer need to rely on what they have in order to feel secure, because their sense of self is grounded in something much deeper and unchanging: truth. You know, there's a story told of a man who spent his entire life expanding his material world. He built businesses, acquired wealth, and surrounded himself with everything that society considers success. But despite it all, he was never at peace. His mind was always occupied. His heart was always slightly unsettled. Every gain brought with it new concerns, new responsibilities, and new worries. So one day while traveling, somehow we entered into a small study hall and saw an elderly man sitting quietly, completely absorbed in the book he was learning. There was nothing impressive about the man or the room, nothing that would draw attention. But somehow there was a sense of calm, a sense of presence that the man had never experienced before. He sat down and watched, and after some time he asked the elderly man what he was doing. He looked up and smiled and simply said, "I am living." At first the elderly man's response made no sense to him, but the words stayed with him, and slowly he began to understand. He had spent his entire life increasing what he had, but he had never focused on increasing who he was. And that realization changed everything. He began to learn, to grow internally, and over time, his relationship with everything in his life shifted. Well, he still possessed what he had built, but it no longer controlled him. His sense of self was no longer dependent upon it. He was no longer living as a slave in a gilded cage. So the bottom line, in the end, this is the quiet but profound teaching of the Mishnah. A person can spend their whole life building a world around themselves, increasing what they have, expanding their external reality, and yet remain internally unsettled. Or a person can invest in building their inner world, deepening their connection, refining their soul, and anchoring themselves in something that is eternal. And when that happens, everything else falls into place. Because ultimately, it is not the size of a person's life that determines its value, but the depth of their connection within it. If a person fills their life with things, they will always be concerned with protecting and maintaining them. But if a person fills their life with meaning, with Torah, with inner clarity, then they create something everlasting that cannot easily be taken away from them. And that is the message that Hillel leaves us with. Not a rejection of the world, but a reorientation within it. Not a call to withdraw, but a call to anchor, to build, but to build from the inside out. Because when a person increases what is eternal within them, a connection to God Almighty and His Torah, they do not just live more, they finally understand what it means to truly be alive. I hope you found this lecture interesting and informative. May God Almighty bless you with the strength and wisdom to follow the advice of the sages. Next week, God willing, we'll continue with the end of this Mishnah, the 7th Mishnah in chapter 2 of Pirkei Avot. Let us all continue to pray for a swift and complete victorious end to the war in the Middle East with the total annihilation of Iran and all of her proxies. Let us celebrate once again the return of all our hostages. May God Almighty cure the sick and injured, comfort all the mourners, and return home all the brave IDF soldiers led by Mashiach Tzidkeinu quickly and in our time. Again, once again, thank you for attending the lecture. I hope that you found it interesting and hope it means something deeper than just words, that it's help you in some way to navigate this minefield that we live in. It's not a walk in the park at all. God should bless you all with all that is good, happiness, health, and safety. And again, please, if you have not yet, subscribe, hit the like button, and share with your friends. Everyone's looking for meaning in life. Sometimes even when they don't realize it. Talk to them. God bless and be well. Shabbat Shalom. Again, thank you for attending.